Tonight on Time Goes News, at an Allied conference, a British commander and member of the royal family takes out his pistol and shoots a bullet into some revolutionary new material. That material is pykrete, and Lord Mountbatten promises it can build the greatest ship ever known to man. And now, a word from our sponsors.
More taste, smoother on the throat. Better smoke. Join the Time Ghost Army.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Indy Neidell with a Time Ghost Newsflash. Our top story tonight, the new British invention, almost too fantastic to believe. Let's rewind to September 1942, when a book-length dossier arrives on the desk of Lord Louis Mountbatten, Chief of Combined Operations, Headquarters. Just a quick note here. The sources detailing the story I'm about to tell can sometimes be pretty vague. Between them, there are some discrepancies in timelines and on the extent of different people's involvement. Some specifics may not completely match up with what you might have heard. Anyhow, that dossier on Mountbatten's desk is from his eccentric director of programs, Geoffrey Pyke, a man who's led a storied life. During the Great War, he was arrested in Germany for being an undercover reporter, but he broke out of his internment camp, escaped to the Netherlands, and returned to Britain a hero. During the interwar years, he was both a London investor and a pioneer in experimental childhood education. He's also already devised multiple schemes to stop or to turn the tide of World War II. But the one here is perhaps the most radical and will definitely be his most remembered. Save a few important victories, the war up until September 1942 has been a pretty bleak time for the Allies, and the Battle of the Atlantic is no exception. Britain isn't starving, but hundreds of thousands of Allied tonnage has fallen prey to U-boats every month. June was the worst month yet, with around 650,000 tons sunk. Pyke is promising Mountbatten the solution. He came upon it when working on ways to prevent ships from icing over in freezing Arctic weather. He realized that while ice can be a hindrance, it can also provide an advantage. You would be hard-pressed to find anything cheaper on this earth than water, for example. If Pyke could somehow find a way to harness it, he could transform the war effort. He became convinced that ice was strong enough to withstand the impact of large-caliber shells after reading a 1924 issue of National Geographic. It contained an account of how a patrol vessel had fired 6-pound shells at an iceberg, only for the iceberg to simply absorb the shots. Sometimes the explosive's fuse wouldn't even go off. All that really happened was the patrol vessel wasting its ammunition. Ice still has a major weakness, heat, but Pyke met just the man to help him solve this. Austrian researcher and pioneer of polymer science, Professor Hermann Mark, informed Pyke that ice melts at a much slower rate when it's insulated. So a 300-foot wide block of ice in water around 11 Celsius would melt entirely in a week. But if you encase the same block of ice in wood, it will lose only 0.9%, less than 1% of its mass in about 100 days. After some back and forth, Pyke and Professor Mark both arrive at the idea of reinforcing ice rather than encasing it by alloying it with wood pulp. Pyke leapt upon the potential this reinforced ice had, which he has neatly summarized to Mountbatten in the title of his dossier, a mammoth unsinkable vessel with functions of a floating airfield. But how mammoth, you ask? Well, it would be 2,000 feet in length, that's just over 600 meters. For reference, way into the distant future, in July 2021, one of the largest container ships in the world, Ever Given, will get itself stuck in the Suez Canal. Ever Given's length will be just over 1,300 feet, so Pyke's floating airfield will literally be mammoth, and it will literally be unsinkable as well. Ice doesn't sink, so an ice ship would need to be blown to pieces to be demobilized, which would never happen because any damage is easily repairable. The refrigerating pipes will be made of replaceable cardboard, and any holes can be immediately filled with crushed ice and water. This colossal vessel could sail to the Atlantic and facilitate the air cover Allied convoys desperately need to counter the U-boat threat. Pyke's dossier is filled with even more ideas on the potential of this new substance, like cannons spraying a sort of liquid reinforced ice that freezes the enemy's coastal defenses, or hundreds of iceberg ship hybrids which will smash into enemy vessels, sinking them through brute force. Does this all sound crazy to you? Well, yeah, But Pyke has found a way to rationalize it. As he writes to Mountbatten, the war can be won either by having 10 of everything to the enemy's 1, including the ships to carry it, or by the deliberate exploitation of the super obvious and the fantastic. A fan of the fantastic himself, Mountbatten wholeheartedly agrees with Pyke's line of reasoning. He brings the idea to Winston Churchill in December. You will not be surprised to learn he too is dazzled by it. Churchill briefs his Chief of Staff committee on the matter. There are, of course, doubters, but by the start of 1943, Project Habakkuk is in full swing. Now, most secondary sources say Habakkuk is a reinforced ice-only project, but according to a couple Allied memoranda from the Quebec Conference, which we'll get to in a bit, Habakkuk is a broader effort to build floating airfields. There are 3 different Habakkuks. Habakkuk 2 is the reinforced ice construction. 1 will be made of wood, and number 3 will be a smaller and faster floating airfield made of steel. But Habakkuk 2 is what everyone seems to be most excited about. Pyke and combined operations have already set Austrian-born Max Perutz to work on exploring the possibilities of reinforced ice. Sometime in the first months of the year, his team arrives at the exact formula of wood pulp and ice. In honor of its inventor, they call it pykrete, like concrete, but Pyke. The National Research Council of Canada has also been assigned to build a small-scale prototype. They're progressing at a remarkable speed, and a 1,000-ton model has begun to be built. By late March, the Canadian government agrees to take on responsibility for building the first full-size pykrete Habakkuk ship. Work continues throughout the following months, with Churchill continuing to be dazzled by the possibilities of Habakkuk and frustrated by projected delays. He sees Habakkuk as invaluable for an invasion of Norway, France, or even Japan. And now we arrive at the Quebec Conference in August 1943. I'm already covering this top-secret military conference, codenamed Quadrant, in my regular weekly series. But did you know that Habakkuk is also on the agenda? In fact, Chief of the Imperial General Staff, Alan Brooke, has promised Mountbatten that he can introduce pykrete to the Americans himself. To do so, Mountbatten reportedly practices a rather extreme form of show and tell. Accounts differ on the specifics, but Lord Lewis, apparently, brings into the conference room 1 large cube of ice, block, and 1 large block of pykrete. He asks the strongest man there to try and split them both with an axe. Chief of the Army Air Forces, Henry Arnold, steps up and easily splits the ice in 1 swing. He then swings down on the pykrete, but when he makes impact, he yells in pain and the axe flies from his hand. The pykrete is no worse for wear. For the grand finale, Mountbatten then takes out his pistol. He shoots a bullet into the pure ice, shattering it into splinters. He then turns his gun on the pykrete and fires, but the bullet fails to destroy the block. It doesn't even lodge inside it. Instead, it ricochets off, causing much alarm, and, by some accounts, grazes Admiral Ernest King. It is a moment of chaos, but Mountbatten has proven what pykrete can do. He and other delegates promised the Americans it has great potential for offensive operations in the Pacific. They seem to buy it. The consensus is that experiments and construction should continue with a view to having a completed Habakkuk 2 by spring 1945. As a side note, 2 Habakkuk 3s will be constructed in the Pacific. The wooden Habakkuk 1 idea is dropped. So, what will happen next in the story of pykrete and Habakkuk? Well, it will all go downhill from here, in fact. Fortunes in the Atlantic have already swung decisively in the Allies' favor, and this is with conventional means, suggesting revolutionary ones aren't that necessary. Pyke himself will be sidelined as the Americans take a bigger role in things. Apparently, his eccentric ideas and his manner upsets many of them. And the manifold problems with the basic idea of pykrete will also soon be apparent. The amount of steel needed to build the refrigeration plants to produce pykrete would be eye-watering, and the amount of wood pulp needed would lead to paper shortages throughout the British Empire. Overall, the Allies estimate that the production cost for 1 pykrete Habakkuk would be equal to or even greater than the cost of building a small fleet of aircraft carriers. By January 1944, Project Habakkuk will be officially dropped by all parties involved. Pyke will already be working on some other projects, none of which will receive the same attention as pykrete, and he will soon be frozen out of his work at Combined Operations. The sad end to his remarkable life will come when his landlady finds him dead in his room after an intentional overdose of barbiturates in 1948. His obituary in the Times will read, "The death of Geoffrey Pyke removes one of the most original, if unrecognized, figures of the present century." A bleak ending, but let's step back a bit. Maybe a floating airfield made of reinforced ice was just an impractical pipe dream. And Pyke's sad ending aside, it is a light-hearted story we can all have some fun with. But the fact that everyone from Churchill to Allied chiefs of staff to respected scientists thought it possible tells you something about this war. It is hailing nuclear technology, computers, and radar. It will bring rockets and jets. It's showing the fantastic and terrible power that humans could harness in the world. The impossible is becoming possible many times over. And maybe in that context, a mammoth, unsinkable vessel with functions of a floating airfield doesn't seem all that crazy. Well, that is all for now for this Time Ghost Newsflash. We are doing these because, well, they're fun, and they give an interesting perspective on specific parts of the war. But we also do them to keep your attention on the fact that we are still fundraising for the D-Day project. At Quebec, the Allies continue making plans for Operation Overlord, and if you want to see our in-depth treatment of how those plans go down in reality, then go support this project by joining the Time Ghost Army at patreon.com or timeghost.tv. See you next time.